Good morning, everybody. It is early. I'm still getting up at the time before the time change. So I've been getting up at 3:30 and 4 in the morning, but I'm making good use of my morning time. I've already started the fire, made a coffee, and as I do every year at New Year's, I write in my journal. And I don't do this often. Maybe once a month or every couple of months, I just brain dump on what's been going on, major things that have happened. And in the last couple of years since COVID started, things I am grateful for, because it's really easy to get stuck in the doom and gloom. But really, a lot of good things have come out of COVID, especially for me personally and our family, and just things that we have kind of taken on because there was nothing else to do. We couldn't travel as much, and so we've used our time kind of wisely to start new things. And so on the topic of being grateful, on New Year's Eve day, a friend called us and his friend had hit a little buck fawn deer, and they wondered if we wanted it. And the answer is of course, because we wanted to top up the meat in our freezer. I had already harvested a deer on Halloween, but a little bit more venison in the freezer is always a good thing. And that means the animal doesn't go to waste. And this deer was pretty much killed instantly. The driver hit it in the head. That might be too much information, but when you're collecting roadkill, it's important that the meat is salvageable. So the entire deer basically was salvageable, and we'll show it to you here in a bit. But one of the other things I wanted to talk about was what to do if you find a deer. Either you're gifted a deer or you pick up roadkill. You can't just pick it up and butcher it. You need to report it to the MNRF. So I'm going to quickly show you that process, and that makes your harvest or your deer legal to have or to possess. And so we are going to cut that deer today. So the other deer that I harvested, we cut into roasts, grind, and made sausage. So this deer, because I like to use ground venison in basically any recipe I would use beef in. So sausage, lasagna, cabbage rolls, meatballs, hamburgers, venison burgers, anything like that, we use venison. So we're going to grind the entire thing. Part of it will be for ground venison, which we don't cut with any fat at all. We never have. And then the other part of it will be for sausage, which we'll bring you along for next weekend.
This is the website that you would go to register either roadkill or a gifted animal. So if you search Keep a Dead Wild Animal Ontario, this is the site that will come up. And it has a ton of information. It has everything you need to know as far as species of animals, whether you are dealing with a species at risk, whether you're dealing with a bird or a mammal. It lists the type of different animals that you potentially could possess and that you must register, and the laws and regulations around the registration. At the very bottom of this page, you will see a link to create a One Key ID. So click this link right here. It will take you to that page. It will allow you to create an account, and from there you will be able to register your animal. So I did this as soon as we got home. I registered the deer on December 31st, and it asks you to enter information where you found the deer, so closest crossroads, your name, the species of animal, the sex of the animal, etc. And once you submit the online form, then you get an email into your account to say it's kind of proof of registration. And it is really as easy as that. I will include the link for this website in the description box below, just so that you have it.
We've had our coffee and we're ready to go. This is deer that got hit by a car on New Year's Eve day that our friend called us about. And yes, it's sad. And many of you are thinking, oh, you would eat roadkill, but this deer was fresher than most of the meat that you're going to buy in a grocery store. So it was only dead for 2 hours when we picked it up, and it was steaming when we cleaned it. And so we know it was fresh. And as you can see, it doesn't have any bruising whatsoever on the body. The only thing that had damage was the head. And we did, one of the sides was damaged because of where it hit the ground in the ditch. So it's in really good shape, and it would be a shame for it to go to waste. So we are going to process it this morning. Like I said before, we already have some venison in the freezer. So this meat we are going to cube up today, vacuum seal, and then next weekend we are going to make it into ground venison and sausage. So we're gonna get going. The first thing we're going to do is cut the shoulders off. And that's pretty easy to do. And then we're just going to transfer this into the heated garage where we can then process. So I'm gonna hand one of these to Brian. He's behind the camera. I'm not being overly careful. I'm not being overly careful about where I cut. I'm not worried about the meat because it is all going, we're gonna cube it all and it's all going into grind. But if I was, I'd be probably being a little bit more careful about where I'm cutting. Okay, so we're gonna take this into the garage and start processing. Before we get started, the first thing we do is sharpen all the knives. That's Brian's jam. It takes me forever, and I almost always come close to stabbing myself. And then we're going to start to cut the meat up. We have a bucket for trimmings. We have 2 meat totes that we're going to use for the meat. And I'm also going to keep the bones for bone broth. We also have some rags, some hot water with wet rags to help with the process. We use a bunch of different knives when we're cutting meat, but we do have the Outdoor Edge processing kit, which is awesome. It has all of the tools you need to field dress your deer and also to cut it. So we really like it. I'm gonna trim the fat, and if there's enough fat, I'm gonna make soap. I'm going to render it down and to make soap. As we work away, we are going to look for any bruising, but I think if there is some, we're probably going to find it on the main body of the deer when we bring in the next pieces, because these pieces are looking pretty good. Hey Mom and Aunt Sandra, I remember a while ago cleaning out some stuff at your house, and you were talking to me about, I feel like it was your grandfather or some relative, it escapes me now, that had a meat market. I worked at a meat market, and that apron is the one you had given me. So putting it to good use. Instead of bringing the whole deer in, as you can see, we bring it in parts. So we just use a Sawzall to cut the deer up into parts. We cut it here to save the tenderloins, which are on the other piece. We'll bring them in next, but this, we want to get the back straps off. There's one piece of the back strap. The other piece will come on the other, but you can see all this silver skin. I'm going to remove that before I chunk it out. find these back straps make really, really nice tender roasts or chops. We'll cut them into chops just so we can show you. And because this deer is so young, this meat is super tender. So you do have those options. Okay, so let me just show you what these look like as chops. Delicious little medallions. Tasty. All we have left is the back end to finish. And so we're going to take off, these are the tenderloins here. So Brian's going to take those off and I'm going to get to work on cutting off the leg meat. When you're cleaning the legs, when you find the seam on the top of the leg, it's a natural seam. And when you peel that seam back, just inside that seam, there's a gland. So you want to remove all of that tissue. I don't know what it tastes like, but we always remove it before we don't include it in the meat to grind. We finished trimming all the meat and we got one full tote, which is about what we expected because it was just like this year's fawn or last year's fawn. It was a small deer. But I'm thinking that's about 30 pounds. I'll let you know weigh in once we package it. So I'm gonna take this in and weigh it into 7.5 pound bags because we mix it with 25% pork fat. So we'll make the sausage in 10-pound packages. And then we also kept all of the bones except for the rib cage. And the last thing I'm going to do is just cut these bones, the ones that are closed on the ends, cut them in half so that when I make my bone broth, the marrow is exposed and that helps to pull all the good things out of the bone. So I'm just gonna do that now. We're babysitting my sister and brother-in-law's dog. So if you hear the tap, tap, tapping, that's River. Hey, get down. Doing the river dance around the island. She's a high energy, let's say that. So I've got all of my equipment out here. I have our food saver, which I'm going to use to package the meat in the 7.5 pound packages. This is a postal scale, so I can weigh the meat, my container to weigh the meat in, and then the meat. So we're gonna get going here. Lots going on in the house today. Okay, so I'm just going to weigh 7.5 pounds. You're gonna have to live through the whining. We got 30 pounds of meat exactly. Not bad for free deer, so that's really exciting. We are going to make sausage and ground venison maybe next weekend. Wow.